Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Mill Spouse Transition live stream. I am Anna Larson, your host for today. I am so excited to be joining you with my guest, Bruce Thompson. Now, what we're going to be talking about today, many service members join active duty military service as young adults. And then they spend their the next 2 decades of their lives on active duty status. So they know very little past what military life offers. Similarly, a military spouse will often spend just as much time in the active duty military life with very little connection to the civilian world. When transition and retirement come around, there are some expectations about what life should look like. Now, this comes from both the service member and the military spouse sides of things, but how often are those expectations realized? That is the question behind today's conversation. Transition expert Bruce Thompson, he asked service members to figure out the answer to 2 questions. Who are you outside the uniform, and what do you want to do post-service? Now, I, as a military spouse, find that those same 2 questions really need to be posed to the military spouse as well. Who are you outside of active duty military life? And what do you want to do now that it's ending? We're so excited to have you here for today's conversation. Where we are going to be talking about finding out who you are after active duty military service, and that is with Bruce Thompson. Now, I'm going to pull up his bio and introduce him to you all so I can bring him up on stage and we can start this conversation. So, Bruce is a 24-year Marine Corps veteran. He has spent the last 8 years serving as an advocate for those in the military and veteran space with a focus on the military transition process. Now, if you have been around LinkedIn at all in any capacity with the military or veteran community, you will have seen Bruce Thompson somewhere on there. He has taught the Department of Labor Transition Assistance Program, assisted in building multiple nonprofit organizations, is the top mentor on Veterati, and has so much more. He pays it forward to this community, and you see that all the time. So I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to bring up Bruce, and I'm very excited to have him here. Hi, Bruce.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for letting me come in and have this conversation with you.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. I am very excited. Look who's here supporting you 100%.
You gotta have the best teammate possible. If you and your spouse aren't on the same team having those conversations, then what are you doing?
That's right. Look, my spouse jumped in too. We've got both of them here saying hi right now.
Nothing like having supportive spouses. That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah, well, you don't need much of anything else, do you?
You got the right person by your side. Amazing how life is a beautiful thing.
That is absolutely so true. So, Bruce, what started this conversation for us, let me pull up this slide really quick. Okay, this is the LinkedIn post that started the road to this live stream. Bruce dropped this into LinkedIn, and this just really intrigued me. So basically saying 2 questions all transitioning service members need to be able to answer: who you are and what do you want to do? Tell me a little bit about why you posted this. Like, where did this come from? Why is this such an important question to you?
So, in my opinion, these 2 questions, they set the foundation for what you're going to do next. And I phrase this, for those transitioning from the military, but you can take this question to say, who are you and what do you want to do next? And ask it to high school graduates, to college graduates, to people at different phases and transitions of their lives. And it sets the ground because, man, if we don't know who we are, I mean, at that soul of who are you, what gets you going, what makes you smile, what are there special things that just get the blood pumping and you're like, yes, let's do this. Well, we have to have that self-awareness. Otherwise, we'll go down a path we should never be. Same thing, when we ask ourselves, what do we want to do next when we talk about careers? We hear a lot about, transitioning service members not sticking around that first or second job very long, a lot of it's because we didn't figure out who we were and what we wanted to do. And we just jumped on the first offer that came along because, well, let's be honest, we were scared and didn't really know what happened because we spent 4 to 40 years in uniform. It's what we knew. We didn't know anything else. So in the military, I did X. So I want to get out and continue to do X. And you figure out, huh, I didn't really like doing that in the military. You're like, well, why are you still doing it? And you're like, oh, I can do something different. And it's like the light bulb goes on. And I'm speaking from personal experience. I got out and I had military headhunter recruiters call me and offer me a 6-figure job doing electronic maintenance. And I was like, hey, I know how to do that. I'll keep doing it. And it didn't last long. And it's because I'd never answered those 2 questions. So as I talk to individuals, I ask them this. And so I post on LinkedIn because I think it's a great question that a lot of people have never been asked. And if they really are honest with themselves and they do an assessment, it really helps them to move forward. And again, they're not easy questions to answer.
Yeah. I can imagine, especially from the veteran side of things, right? When you have been a certain person and done the same thing for a couple of decades of military service, right? Like redefining those 2 questions, that's a kind of a big deal. Like that's not something you just sit down and say, "Oh, let me just journal it out and I'll have the answer tomorrow," kind of thing, right? I mean, this is like a retransformation of kind of the person you've been and the job you've been doing. And so much of military service seems to create that identity for the service member. So, just from a personal standpoint, how did you work through that process, Bruce? Like, what did it take for you to kind of start to define that who you are and what you do?
Well, I'll be honest, it took a few failures, false starts in a couple of those two jobs I had. And then I kind of hit that rock bottom where I was lost, didn't know what was going on. And, Neela, my wife is a rock star and kind of said, it doesn't matter what you do when it comes to the money side. She's like, we want you to do something that you're going to have a passion for, that you're going to love, and that, excites you and gives you that, the love of life again. And really it was her giving me the permission, one, to leave the jobs that were the wrong fit and were killing me, but 2, to give me that freedom to figure out who I was and where I could be. That really opened the door for me to, I don't have to go chase a high paying job. I can chase something that, the passion that aligns with who I really am. That came through.
Mm,
And of course, when you started, hey, what do you really do? I was like, well, I've always kind of been the counselor, the coach, the mentor. And you're like, well, if I'm going to be doing those things, who is the audience that I can speak to that I have the best relationship with? Well, of course, it's the military veteran, military spouse community. And so things just started clicking and falling into place. And I started teaching the TAP workshops in Southern California. Then when I moved to Jacksonville, Florida, I continued to do those. Nonprofit work, kind of fell into place. And it was nothing. I never had a design that I was going to be in the nonprofit, community or industry. If you'd have asked me, 8.5 years ago when I retired, where do you see yourself? I would have been like corporate America, a suit and tie, doing something in business. And that's when I left the military. That was what I would tell you. That
mm.
is not a plan. That is not something that I worked out, and hence why I had false starts with, finding career paths. But that was, what was in my mindset. And
What's
then struggling for that first year is how I really kind of got to where I needed to be, where I wanted to be, and where I've been thriving.
So let me just ask you this, Bruce. Like you're saying that what your answer was. That was what your mindset was. Do you feel like those were expectations placed on you by other people, or an expectation of this is what happens when you get out of the military because you hadn't thought through those questions?
Well, one, I hadn't thought through those questions. No one asked me those questions. No one kind of sat Bruce down and said, "Who are you? What do you want to do next?" It
Mm,
just wasn't happening. Um, I got my degree. I had my MBA, so of course, got my master's in business administration. So why would I not be in business? It was in HR, so because I believed in being in the people business. So it was like I'm going to find a job doing that. And of course, the first job was senior production supervisor. Had 45 people in my shift. Great company and everything. It was just didn't align with who I was with any
mm,
passions. Uh, and and you go through these experiences to learn. And again, I signed my Marine Corps contract when I was 17. I was shipped to boot camp at 18 in a month, and I spent the next 24 years being a Marine. So I didn't have all those jobs in my 20s to kind of help figure out who I was, where I belonged. I did what Uncle Sam told me to. I showed up to this base with this unit and did that job. And 2.5, 3 years later, Uncle Sam said, "Hey, we want you to go to this base now and do this job with this unit." And you just kept doing it. And then finally it was like, "Hey, Uncle Sam's not telling me where to go and what to do anymore.
yeah.
What do I do now?" And it's that funny thing that all of us who serve at some point take the uniform off, but rarely do we ask that question. You
Yeah.
know,
I like what John says here that there's nobody really asking service members those questions. It's almost like if you don't happen upon Bruce's comment on LinkedIn, you might not ever ask yourself those questions as you're transitioning out. And it comes with those failures and maybe even crashing and hitting rock bottom to be able to say, I got to do something different. I haven't figured this out the right way. I feel like a lot of what we've been seeing in the transition world, just in general, as service members are trying to navigate that next phase in their life. Would you agree with that? Like,
yeah.
or do you feel like there's other places and locations we should be hearing it from, and just maybe people aren't listening?
So one, TAP has its purpose, but most of us don't understand what that purpose is. And that's a whole nother conversation. So I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. Uh,
Okay.
but I found most success using the nonprofit resources uh, that are having that. It's hopping on different calls like this. It's watching videos. It's having conversations on Veterati, which is just informational interviews. It's finding a mentor on American Corporate Partners that are going to help take that from you and really expand on who you are. It's having those real conversations that most of us are dreadful of. Like,
Mm,
don't make me answer a real question. Like, let's just keep it on the surface level, and let's not dig deep into who we are. And we have to find that person who you know breaks it back down and says, "What do you want to do? Where are you going?" Uh, and if we're lucky, we find that person early enough, you know, that helps us guide us and mentor us so that we don't get to veteran status and still asking ourselves, what do we want to do? Hopefully, we can figure that out a year, two, 15 years early, and we can always be working towards it. But it's kind of that mindset shift, and we're getting better because it used to be, hey, we're not thinking about transition to our last 6 months in service. And
yeah.
now people are talking about, at least 12 to 18 months, if not 24. And that's all happened here in the last 5 or 6 years where we've really been able to uh, change the storyline on waiting till the last minute to starting to plan. And
Yeah.
there's still some last minute, there always will be, but there's more of that pre-planning going on. We have people reaching out, asking questions on Veterati, uh, getting on LinkedIn early, because a lot of people are like, I don't know what LinkedIn was. Tap just told me to create an account, so I created an account and never touched it. It's going to networking events. It's one, talking to your significant other, whether it's your wife, your boyfriend, girlfriend, your mom or dad, your brothers, your buddies, whoever it is that sounding board for you, having real conversations. And again, that's something that many of us fail to do until we're kind of at that, oh crap moment. So
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so I want to focus for just a minute on what you were just saying, where you said, start talking to the people around you that really care about you, right? Because one of course my focus when it comes to transition is the military spouse, right? Now, we're not employed by the DoD. TAP is not built for us. That is not the purpose of TAP, right? We know that. We understand that. But it is really hard for a military spouse to just go from the same thing as service member, right? Where you've lived this certain active duty life for potentially decades, and then to just go flip, okay, now you're a civilian and everything's different, but you're supposed to just kind of power your way through it without any real guidance. So when I heard these questions, I thought, gosh, that really applies to the military spouse too, because we identify for so many years as whatever volunteer position we might hold, whatever unit we might belong to, whatever group we might participate in, but more specifically as a military spouse. And then you have this massive identity crisis as you're leaving active duty military service. And when you have a spouse and a service member going through kind of that identity crisis at the same time, it can be really, really difficult. So tell me a little bit about like your experience with helping coach spouses, and maybe even how your spouse helped you kind of, I love that you said that she kind of gave you permission to have changes made, right? Like that you were able to make different choices than you thought you had to make. And that was kind of that first step in saying, oh, I can do something different that might actually be something I love.
yeah. So one, military spouses are almost the masters of transition, because hey, spouse has deployment orders, so military spouse has to transition from doing what they were doing to doing what they were doing plus what the service member was covering. Um, hey, you talked about volunteerism. Military spouses volunteer. Without military spouse volunteering, readiness would just go solo. And they gain all these different experiences and knowledges, and they kind of are able to, hey, I like this, I didn't like that, and it starts letting them know what's going on. And then we always have that wonderful, the kids are old enough, or we figure out, the spouse is going to go to work. So we have that two income household, and the spouse says, okay, I got a job doing X. By the time they really like, I got my feet planted, this is really going well for me, the service member comes home and says, hey, guess what? I got orders. And of course the spouse is like, you got to start all over again. And the spouse, I don't know about everybody else's, but Neela handled our moves. I had the orders. Hey, I'm focused on the next assignment, where I'm going to go. Neela was on, okay, what are we going to downsize for? What needs to be packed with us? What can the movers pack? And she had to go through all that. And then we get to the next duty station, receiving the household goods, getting everybody established, kids in school, everything going on. And half the time I show up to a new unit and I'm immediately in the training exercise or deployment. So new town, have to figure it all out. And she's really doing it on her own. And some spouses have to do that. And it's like, okay, we have the household established. Now let me go find my next job. And it's the whole process. And again, got the job, got my feet settled, I'm enjoying it. And the spouse comes home and says, I've got orders again.
Yeah.
And so every 2 to 3 years, military spouses are making career transitions, are having to figure out their new networks, their who does what, who's best, what the best schools are, uh, different uh, extracurricular activities to get signed up for, where to live, grocery stores, you name it. They're always doing the transition and refocusing, and that's where I think when it comes to the service member finally leaving service and having to make that final, transition from service to veteran and figure out what's next, leaning on our spouses who have been there, done it multiple times, uh, it's a great thing. And luckily, when I retired, Neela had a great job. We weren't leaving the area, and we both weren't having to go through it at the exact same time.
Mm.
And she was able to really, um, again, give me grace and guidance that helped me with that. You know, it was 11 months that I struggled to figure out who I was, where I belonged, with different false starts. So that is where the team has to be working together to come up with these different things. But one of the things that really made everything work is Neil and I have never been afraid to have the tough conversations,
Mm.
call each other out on our BS, to come out there and say, what are you doing? What is your plan? You know, whether it came down to the mental aspect of it, the physical aspect from it, because military, we're out there PTing, our physical training is constant, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, no one's telling me I need to get up and go run 5 miles today. Like, maybe I won't go do that. Hey, I don't have to get up at 4:30 and hit the gym. Oh, this is nice. And all of a sudden you're like, you find a rut that's not a healthy rut for you, and there's balances back and forth. And again, some people get that job and they're that traveler. They're on a flight Monday morning, they fly home Friday night, they work 12 to 14 hours a day, and it's like they're in constant deployment mode, and it'll burn you out at a certain point. And there's others where, hey, I couldn't find a job right away, so I took a job, and they might be working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet, especially in today's economy. Where are you going to be? How are you going to find that fitting? Some are going to college while trying to, still maintain a full-time job, because I got to get that degree so I can get this, or I got to get that certification so I can go here. And the spouses, a lot of them are on the exact same thing of, hey, I need to get that certification, I need to get that degree finished. So we have extremely similar transition paths. It's just a matter of, how well did we plan for them? Are we both doing the same transition at the same time, which is always a joy. Um, but having open and realistic conversations about mentally, physically, where you are, what's going on, and when I'm down, Neela pulls me back up. When Neela's down, I pull her back up. When we're both down, we kind of just figure out how to get each other, back up to where we're starting to get that momentum, that rhythm back. But
Yeah.
it takes complete teamwork, and that's before we even start talking about transitioning with teenagers. That's
It's a whole nother.
that's like adding a couple more adults into the mix. But these are all those things that we fail to talk about. And so I tell people during their transition, uh, if you're married and you're not having open conversations with your spouse about what you're thinking, what your plan is, you're wrong. Because if you're like, hey, I'm going to get out of the military and I'm going back to my hometown, well, your spouse might have a different plan of where they want to live. So those conversations have to be had. And sometimes we have to say, to figure things out, pick a location that you want to go and then figure things out from there. Some people, I'm going to find a job, and that's the priority. When me and Neela, at the end of that year, we picked a location, and we just up and said, we're going to go together. This is going to work. And we picked a spot on the map and said, we're going. And then we got here and, we just made things work. So that relationship is important. And I'll tell you, without neither by my side, man, I'd be lost. But that's what we have to have with our spouses. If you're not having that, you need to start having those conversations.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that the starting conversations, because I feel like if we're making those decisions, when there is a spouse or children involved, if you're making those decisions in a silo, it's never going to go well. If you're not communicating what you want, and this goes for both the spouse and the service member, right? If you're not communicating what your needs are, what your dreams are, the way you envision post military life to look like, it's very likely that your partner has a completely different idea than you do,
Yeah,
or you might have talked about the big dream thinking that's the reality, but then the reality comes and hits you in the face with, nope, sorry, you cannot fully retire. You do have to have a job because of where we've chosen to live. Or, the taxes are going to be too high in this state. So if we want to live in the state we want to live in, I have to have a job, or, whatever that looks like for your family in particular. And it's always going to have those variables attached to it. So those conversations are so, so incredibly important. And you can't start having those 12 months out. Like, that's so late in the game. I mean, I'm telling everybody everything my spouse and I did wrong. We did all of this wrong, which is partly why I think we struggled through transition as much as we did. We had COVID along with all of those other things, so we had an extra layer, but that's just there to say there is always going to be extra things that impact your ability to make decisions, have conversations. Yeah, I mean, how many service members do we hear deploying for 6 months of their 12 right before, they're supposed to leave active duty? It happens all
I,
the time.
I got a couple buddies right now that are overseas and they're in their final year of service. But the funny part is most of us who are in the transition space to help, most of what we're talking about are our lessons learned because we failed to do X, Y, or Z. And we realize, man, we really should have done that. And so we're trying to help people not go through those same mistakes that we did. I tell people all the time, when I talk about my first year out and everything I did wrong and the struggles I went through, one of the main reasons that I started teaching TAP and I started doing what I do is because I didn't want others to go through that same, rough year.
Yeah.
We were lucky that, we took care of, we were debt free and kid free when we retired. So that gave us the financial freedom to be able to not struggle right away. Neither had a full-time job. I got my disability claim in, on time. So we got that back quickly. So all those things, we did those right, but it was the other things that, man, I could have had a much better transition had I done those other things. And mind you, I went to a lot of different transition workshops. I was having conversations. I was networking, but I wasn't networking with a purpose. I wasn't taking the information that I got at those events, those transition, nonprofit transition workshops. It wasn't clicking. I was going through the motions, but it was almost like that, it's not really happening. I'm going to re-enlist them, and just keep doing this. This magical day is not going to be there. So, it's that fear of the unknown that we talk about. Hey, I've done the military for my entire adult life, and all of a sudden, I'm going to take my uniform off for the last time, and it's scary. And we don't have those conversations. We come back and we put it off, because it's a scary conversation. And the more we put it off, the worse it gets. And the failure to be honest with yourself about who you are, where you want to be, those are those things where we have to stop waiting till the last minute. We have to stop, you know, telling ourselves it'll all work itself out. Just don't worry about it. It'll happen. Well, it'll happen. You will get out. You will take the uniform off for the last time. You will
Right.
pick up that ED214. You will leave the base for the last time. And then it's that whole wide world of what's next. And
Yeah.
we have to, have those conversations. So I tell people nowadays, you should be thinking about transition as soon as you get to your first duty station. Military spouses, if we're just honest, the military spouse runs the household in most military families, and those who say no, they don't, they're just lying to themselves. We know who takes care of everything, and the military spouses have to not only be thinking about this for themselves, but they have to be that kick in the backside for the service member, because the service member is so focused on mission accomplishment, on what do I have to do to make mission, what do I have to do to make sure when we deploy, everybody comes home, to make sure all these things that we sign up to serve are accomplished. And the spouses that is that strong, guiding pole that we have, who's thinking about, hey, this is what's coming next. We should do this. We should do that. And I'll tell you, spouses are becoming more educated, getting more certifications. Our versatility is, might as well be on every military spouse's job description. They are versatile, flexible, knowledgeable, can do things that people are like, how did you learn how to do that? Well, no one else was going to do it, and we all
Yeah.
know Murphy's Law. When service member deploys, the car's going to break down, someone's going to the hospital, you name it, something always happens, and the spouse is right there taking care of it all, and probably not telling the service member while they're deployed everything that's happening, because they don't want us stressing or worrying about home when we're forward deployed taking care of a mission. So that's that unspoken thing where people don't really understand what a military spouse does and is capable to accomplish. So I love that you're having these sessions. We're talking more about the military spouses. I give Neela all the praise every time, and I've connected to so many rock star military spouses that are, conquering the world, running their own businesses, setting the tone.
Yeah.
So I love it.
I definitely agree. I think that the vision of what a military spouse is supposed to be has absolutely changed over the last few decades, right? Like what it was in the 90s versus early 2000s to what it looks like today. And just more and more doors and opportunities are opening for military spouses, which I love.
Well,
Um,
that's because more and more military spouses are kicking the door open for themselves.
that's a good way to
No,
put it.
they're no more kind of sitting back waiting for someone to invite them in. They're kicking the door open, saying, "I will have a seat at the table. My voice will be heard." And
Yes.
absolutely positively is a must. So I love that people aren't just sitting back waiting for someone to offer them something. They're going back out there and saying, no, I am
Yeah.
here. I am worthy. I will do X, Y, or Z, and that is amazing. And the great part is, the more we see it from our military spouses, the more we see it from our military children. They see mom and dad kicking butt, and they're like, that's the leadership, that's the inspiration I have. So I'm extremely excited to see what this next generation of military children bring.
Yes, I would agree with you 100%. And I would say that that same attitude, mindset needs to apply to these transition questions, like figuring out who you are, figuring out what you want to do. you cannot just sit back and wait for somebody else to tell you or give you permission to decide, or you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like that same attitude of I'm going to kick this door down and take my seat at the table has to apply to that transition process in order to make things happen better for the future spouses, right? I mean, we've transitioned. Our messy transition was what it was. We're still messing our way through it at times, right? I mean, I think up here earlier, my spouse said something like, "Oh yeah, look, here he goes. I'm 3 years out, still struggle to define who I am and what I want." Right? It doesn't always come easy to every service member. Some of them know. Some of them know exactly what it is, and they just go for it, and then they, it is like they are focused, there is a line of sight, and that's where they're headed. But others, the world is open, and they see a squirrel over here and one over there and one over there, and they want to taste and touch every part of it.
And that's something that we definitely have to address. Not everyone struggles. There are some people that are transition ready years before they transition. They're, both service member and spouse.
Yep.
A lot of us, the focus and the noise is about the struggling transitioning service members, transitioning spouses, because they need the assistance. But if we really go back and start looking at Fortune 500 companies and their top leadership, how many veterans are in those billets, in those jobs? There's a lot. So there's people have figured it out. And that's the thing we have to remember. Having these conversations and figuring things out is what's going to let us go be that awesome person that we're meant to be, to go do the things that we want to do, meant to do, and set the tone. So yes, there's struggle, but we're out there figuring it out, and we're doing amazing things. So that's the thing we have to remember is, yes, as we are, in that early stages of figuring things out, who are you? What do you want to do? And we're like, the whole world's crashing in on us because we don't have the answers yet. We just look to those who have been there and done it before us. They're out there, setting the tone. And so we're all going to get there if we do the things we need to do. So that's the important thing to remember is this isn't, everybody struggles out the gate. Everybody has this. We're all going to have peaks and valleys in life. Transition might be a valley for you. For some, it's a peak. But we're going to figure it out. And when you figure these things out, you're going to skyrocket to one of those peaks, and you're really going to find where you belong, what you want to do. And, that's the dream. That's the wow. That's what we all need to get to.
It's a good feeling, right? Like, I mean,
it's an amazing feeling.
Yeah, it's a great feeling. So two things, just as we're starting to close out now this live stream. First of all, I love what you just said, where you didn't say, to do what you're supposed to do. It's like, it's to do what you're supposed to do, not what others expect of you to do. That's like, I think that's such an important point. And I hope that any military spouse or service member that is listening to this podcast live stream hears those words. This is about what you're supposed to do, not what somebody expects of you to do. And that's really where you're going to find the joy in that transition opportunity that comes knocking at your door. And then I just wanted to throw this out there because Matt made me laugh when we were talking about military spouses kicking the door down. He equated it more with bringing a bazooka or a tank to the party. And sometimes, Matt, I think that is exactly what happens when a powerhouse military spouse enters the room.
And that's one of those things we need it, because sometimes knocking on the door and opening it gently does not work. Sometimes we've got to hit that thing, knock it off the hinges, and open the floodgates for not only ourselves, but for others to be able to come through and do it. And what I tell you is we only get one life. We have to live it the best that we can for what we want, not what someone else wants. I'm a parent. I'm a grandparent as well. There's things that I would love for my kids and my grandkids to accomplish and do, but I can't tell them how to live their life.
Yeah.
They've got to go out there and experience it, make mistakes, find what works for them. And that's where we have to go through. Everybody will put expectations on us, but just because someone's expecting us to do X, Y, or Z doesn't mean that's what we have to do. Sometimes we take the path less chosen because that's what we have to do to create something that never existed before. And we can talk about military spouse and veteran, entrepreneurship. But again, that's a whole nother topic. But wow, are there people out there setting the tone and doing things that have not been done before and creating so much more, which brings more opportunities. So the world's out there. We just got to be able to say we're ready to attack it and do what needs to be done to have our best life.
Yes. I love that, Bruce. Thank you so much. I feel like we are okay. So we're at the close. I would like to do a couple of things. One, I want to pull up your where to find you slide. So if somebody wants to reach out to you, speak with you more on this, can you just let them know the best place to find you, Bruce?
Simply put, if you want to find Bruce, follow me on LinkedIn. It's one of those ones. If you're on LinkedIn with me, I'm easy to find. We go back through. I have shaved the beard. Those of y'all who've seen the Batman shirt, if you don't know, I am Batman. So just throw up the bat signal. I will respond. I'm on X. I'm on Instagram, but LinkedIn is where you want to connect with me.
Yeah. And LinkedIn is really where Bruce is having some amazing conversations, and they are heavily transition focused, service member related. So, if that is it, if that is your community, if that's your conversation, then I highly recommend you head on over there, find Bruce and connect with him. And his wife just dropped his direct link in the comments on LinkedIn. So you can go right to that link. Thank you for doing that. Okay, so as we close out, I just want to say thank you to our sponsor, SpouseLink. As a transitioning military spouse or service member, you probably have a lot more questions than you have answers. And that's why AFMA created SpouseLink to help support, inform, and inspire military spouses around the world with resources to lead you back to your family, back to civilian life. And you can find them at spouselink.org. Now, I do want to say that I personally I am the founder of milspousetransition.com. If you have not heard of milspousetransition.com, it is a transition resource hub specifically for military spouses. I am going out and asking the questions so you don't have to. Do you offer something for spouses? Is this available for spouses as well? Can we use this resource? A lot of times that's not clear when we're going through the transition process. So most recently, I just did a 3-part series. The third part is coming out tomorrow, but it is the military spouse transition checklist. These are things outside of the checklist that your service member has to do. These are things that you might be thinking of as a military spouse, the things you want to make sure that you know about, have a handle on, that aren't necessarily included in that to-do list that your spouse is given by the Department of Defense as they are getting ready to exit. So I just dropped the link down there. Go and take a peek into go take a peek at the comments, and you will see that link there as well. Last but not least, I want to say thank you so much to Bruce for your wisdom and wise words. I feel like from this conversation, we could have like 7 more conversations, right? The TAP program, the conversation program, the conversation, I guess. I don't know what I'm saying right there, but but also just like finding your way is such a big part of that transition process. And I love that you were open and honest and weren't afraid to say, hey, I didn't have it all together. It took me some time. And even now still doing things a little bit differently than I did 2 years ago, right? Because that transition process doesn't happen all at once. It is an ongoing process as you learn to be not part of active duty military life any longer. So thank you so much for being willing to be open and sharing those kinds of conversations with the greater audience. Bruce, What is your final words of wisdom for those who are listening in today or catching the replay?
Well, first, thank you for allowing me to come on. It's always great to have a conversation with you and to talk about the topics that people are shy away from. So, as we talk transition, we will transition from high school to military to college to career to job to this city to that city. What we have to do is have real conversations to plan them out. You know, jumping off the seat of your pants is cool when you're younger. You get a little older, you need to plan that a lot better. So have conversations, think things out, make a plan, set goals. Find mentors, and don't be afraid to put yourself out there and take that risk. You never know. You know, people told me I should go to door one. Well, maybe check out door 3 or 4. You might find where you want to be, what you need to be, and that is going to be something that's going to be magical for you. So set your own path, make your goals, and figure out how to achieve them.
Absolutely. I want to just throw out there too, if you're struggling with that, highly recommend connect. I guess you're this way on my screen. Connect with Bruce or another mentor at someplace like Veterati. They're going to help you be able to talk through and walk through some of those decision-making processes. So I just have to throw that plug out there because I love these mentorship programs that are available, and I don't think that they're utilized by enough transitioning service members and spouses as they go through this. Don't be afraid to connect and ask those questions of somebody who's been there, done that, and or maybe going through it at the same time as you. So, all right. With that, we are going to say goodbyes and thank you very much. And we hope to see you at the next Male Spouse Transition live stream. Have a great day.